Welcome to Adam's Athenaeum. Let's take a look together through the news and records of our times and try to shed light upon the unvarnished truth. Thanks for coming back to listen to this episode about the Patriarchy. Today, I want to talk about the term thrown about society lately called the Patriarchy. In recent years, it has been used as a bludgeoning tool of sorts to bash the American government and the American lifestyle. Many people will say, the patriarchy is holding back women. The patriarchy is what's wrong with our leaders. We need more women. The white patriarchy is outdated. And so on and so forth. I am here to show you why that's wrong, and I'll try to give a slight example of what a real patriarchy would look like. I'm no psychologist or lawyer, just a guy on the internet using as many resources as I can to find out the truth. As always, let's get our definitions out of the way. For this episode, let's define patriarchy, matriarchy, and diarchy. According to Merriam-Webster's, a patriarchy is a social organization marked by the supremacy of the father in the clan or family, the legal dependence of wives and children, and the reckoning of descent and inheritance in the male line. Broadly, control by men of a disproportionately large share of power. A society or institution organized according to the principles or practices of patriarchy. Matriarchy is defined as a family, group, or state governed by a matriarch, a system of social organization in which descent and inheritance are traced through the female line. Lastly, diarchy means a government in which power is vested in two rulers or authorities. Looking at these definitions, it seems pretty obvious that our American society is not a purely patriarchal society. Currently we have a sitting female vice president who assumedly helps to make some of the decisions affecting government. It's not a matriarchal society, as we have not yet been led by a woman. Our society is most closely defined as a diarchy, but why? We have men and women in power in all branches of life. Men and women are CEOs of major businesses. Men and women both have served in the military, Congress, and Senate. Women make the majority of financial decisions in the household. So it's pretty obvious to me that men and women together help to run the society. Jordan Peterson, a great psychologist and professor, once said, "The patriarchy is hierarchy assumed as tyranny." Not many people seem to understand the, quote, lobster argument that Dr. Peterson presents, in which he states that the hierarchical structures have existed for tens of thousands of years, millennium even. These structures existed before we as humans were around, and through science, we have found out that lobsters have a vast and complex hierarchical structure, as do many animal species. But Jordan Peterson references the lobster due to our partially shared genetic heritage. I would like to read a little bit from an article at wokefather.com titled "Female Privilege: Debunking Patriarchy Theory." In this first image, what we're looking at is what patriarchy theory explains and what the patriarchy theory ignores. The above image is a pyramid, otherwise known as the apex fallacy. Modern gender theory sees a small minority of men as powerful and applies that stereotype to all men across all of society. However, when you look at the full pyramid, you see that a small minority of men are at the very top of the pyramid. Women pretty much consume the entire middle, and there's also men at the lower part of the pyramid. So there's men above females in status, yes, but there's also many men who are below the status of women. Patriarchy theory really falls apart when faced with what heterodox academics refer to as the Patriarchy Paradox. The Patriarchy Paradox is the fact that while men do outnumber women in positions of political authority and wealth, they also vastly outnumber women in the lowest echelons of society. Most homeless people are men. Most people working dangerous and industrial jobs are men. Most combat victims are men. Most incarcerated people are men. Most people suffering from substance abuse are men. And most people who commit suicide are men. In other words, Men represent the majority in the both top and bottom levels of society, while women by and large fall into the middle. This is a big problem for patriarchy theory. If men truly dominated society, there shouldn't be so many women who have privilege and advantage over so many men. I wanted to reference this article as it aligns with what Dr. Jordan Peterson said in his interview with GQ. I defer to Dr. Peterson a lot because I believe he is one of the most learned and wise men of our times. He is knowledgeable about what he speaks of, and he always speaks from a point of data, not emotion. In this article, he says, a tiny proportion of men own wealth and capital and do less unpaid labor than women. And a huge proportion of people who are seriously disaffected are men. Most people in prison are men. Most people on the street are men. Most victims of violent crime are men. Most people who commit suicide are men. Most people who died in wars are men. People who do worse in school are men. It's like, where's the dominance here precisely? What you're doing is you're taking a tiny substrata of hyper-successful men and using that to represent the entire structure of Western society. There's nothing about that that's vaguely appropriate. End quote. I would highly advise checking out the full interview from GQ, and I'm sure you can find all sorts of highlights on YouTube. I advise watching the interview in its entirety so that you aren't watching a clipped together, misconstrued representation of what was said. Take some time out of your day to learn and educate yourself. I spend probably 8 hours a day listening to and researching the news I hear. The best advice I have for people these days is read more, listen better, and dig deeper for the truth. What these allude to is the fact that if America was truly patriarchal, women would have no rights. They would be property. Almost no man would be of lesser status than a woman. A woman would not be allowed to work or engage in any activities that could give her recognition as being better than a male. But as I seem to remember, we have a Mother's and a Father's Day. Men and women run businesses, cities, Congress, and the nation. The patriarchy, as modern feminism would like you to believe in, does not practically exist. If the hierarchy structures developed into simply power structures, that's when there would be corruption. But for now, things are pretty even. I'm sure there is still work to be done. But for now, I haven't seen the evidence that the patriarchy exists in modern American or Western societies. To conclude, we need to find more common ground with people rather than trying to divide ourselves by a million different titles. You're a person. I'm a person. We have different ideas and beliefs, and that's okay. What we have lost is communication in a rational way with our friends and peers. I encourage everyone watching this to share this video with someone you wouldn't normally talk politics with. You don't need to try and prove someone wrong. Sometimes you just need to listen. Other times, you must stand for and state what your boundaries are. An argument with name-calling gets you nowhere. An honest conversation that takes a while to produce and will be fraught with all kinds of emotions, but eventually ends in mutual satisfaction, is what the end goal should be. You don't always have to agree with someone to talk to them and treat them like a good human being. And that's where I'll end today's video. I look forward to the factual discussions in the comments, and remember, your emotional hate is not welcome here. If you like the videos I make and the messages I try to spread, please give this video a thumbs up. And don't forget to come back next time for my episode on socialism, an introduction.